This week we're joined by Marianne Mills, who is a passionate educator. She's got a degree in psychology as well as a PGCE, which she's since used to become an incredibly knowledgeable and sought after trainer, teaching others in multiple sectors how to teach courses for their colleagues and staff. In this episode, we're talking about exactly what it means to be qualified. What's a qualification anyway? What's the difference between sharing information and actually delivering a training course? Currently, there are lots of organisations and people who are delivering education in one way or another on this topic of what it means to be neurodivergent. And this conversation is really important because we hope that it will arm you with the understanding of what it means when somebody says they're qualified or they have experience. So we really hope you enjoy this conversation and come out of it armed with a bit more understanding of some of the terminology than you did when you started. Whilst Talk ADHD is not sponsored, we are proudly in partnership with Divergence UK. Divergence is a service staffed by people living with ADHD that evolved out of the experience of them working in services not run by people with ADHD. They know what works. They understand what barriers some people face with other services, and they're constantly exploring how to do things differently so that the service works for the people using it. They did a public consultation before they launched, and they've stayed faithful to what people told them a good service would be like based on their experiences. If you are looking into whether you have ADHD or a coexisting condition, I genuinely would recommend contacting Divergence today.
Folks, welcome back to another episode of Talk ADHD. We are back with a really interesting episode this week. This is a conversation I've been seeing a lot online. It's one that really personally affects me and what I do as a neurodivergent educator and a consultant. It definitely is going to impact on you, Andrew, in terms of what you do and how you validate the work that you do. And it's all about how do we know what someone's ability is and what does accreditation mean in terms of delivering content, in terms of training people on anything. So we've brought in a fabulous trainer and expert on this topic, Marianne Mills, who's taught me how to be a really good trainer. We'll come on to why I maybe didn't actually finish my course later, ADHD. But we've brought Marianne in to talk about what does accreditation mean? What does training mean? What does good look like? And perhaps where some of the confusion is in language that we're seeing online when people say qualified or qualifications or accreditations or certifications. What should they mean and perhaps how are they being used? And how does a client know what good is? How do they know what standard they're going to get from someone that they are choosing to work with? So hopefully, folks, what you'll get by the end of this is an idea of some of the language, some of the nuance in this conversation, and an idea of what you can do if this is something you feel that you would like to do to educate other people, to share your knowledge, your experiences, what maybe you could do in order to make sure that when you present that in front of a client, potentially, that they know exactly who you are, what you do, how you do it, and that you give them a sense of confidence in your ability that extends more than just you as a person. So, all that said, Marianne, nice to see you again. It's been a while.
Hello.
In fact, I haven't seen you since I saw you in person, coming down to do the course, actually, so it has been a while. So, tell us, if you can, about you, about 2M, what it is you are trying to do, and then we'll dive into this topic.
Hey, very, very briefly. So I had a background in care. That's what my background was. I then decided to do a psychology degree. I didn't much like my degree, which I'll come back to. If I hated it, I was going to stop. Anyway, finished my degree, then worked in the care sector, in and out of very many jobs. So I got bored very quickly. And then I was working for a foster care agency and decided, I was asked if I wanted to do some training. So I then thought, okay, well, it's going to be nursing or teaching when I was younger. So I thought, well, I'll opt for teaching. So I was able to do a PGCE in post-compulsory education and training, which is a proper PGCE. It's just you were able to use it because I wanted to train carers. That's what I wanted to do. So I did that and finished. And then I had babies and then was in and out of various jobs. So I was teaching blind students, children with behavioural difficulties, all sorts of stuff really. And then I taught in mainstream teaching psychology, and I just all felt a bit soulless really, to be honest, because it was all about just getting them to pass exams. Teaching health and social care I didn't like because it wasn't fit for purpose. Then I landed a job at National Star teaching teacher training. And I thought, wow, I love this. I absolutely love this. And then I suddenly realised then that it was largely because it was using my psychology. Because I was freelancing, but always feeling like I was being a bit naughty with the way that I was doing it. Everybody loved what I was doing. And I kept thinking, oh, is this right? Is this right? Lockdown happened, lost all my work. And then I thought, maybe I could just set up as my own centre where I can actually give people qualifications. They could do the same as I was doing, but doing it my way. I was going to say earning a bit more money, but I don't know if I am at the moment. So anyway, I set up. And then during COVID, I got out of nowhere. I didn't even think about it. I was diagnosed with ADHD. And all of a sudden, my life made sense. And suddenly thought, this is me. I'm just being me when I'm teaching. And that's why people love it. And I'm not being arrogant when I say that. But people felt really comfortable with me. And I just absolutely loved what I did then. And then so, carrying on from that, I've been doing it. But I've got quite a passion around doing it properly and seeing people doing things. It's that whole fairness thing as well, because there is a lot out there, around what's right, what's not. And I'm not going to lie, it has been quite hard. I'm competing with some of the big boys and girls who are on Google, that people just go straight to the internet. Just this week at the care show, somebody said, I did mine online, like e-learning. How you can learn to teach from a computer. It shouldn't be allowed, and they didn't get anything from it. So I'm always going to be up against those people. So me as the smaller person, but actually the person that does it properly, because I teach people how to train, I say properly, but what they need. Because I know, because I've been there, I've been in a school, I've been in colleges, I've taught in prisons, all sorts of places. So I teach people what I know that they need, not just to the qualification, which we'll get onto.
Okay, marvellous. That's a good intro. Andrew, before we go any further, obviously you've been through an education process to get to where you are, and I don't just mean school, college, uni, I mean continuing CPD, let's call it that. So where is your head on this before we start, in terms of this piece about what does good look like, why is it important, and where's the nuance?
Always start with a nice easy one, don't you? You've done it again. There's something about the relationship between the learner and the trainer that was going through my mind when Marianne was speaking. That's really, really important. And hopefully we'll get more into that and talking about that, because good training should bring out those innate skills, shouldn't it? That's always the way I've taught is to induce that strength that people have. You don't come to a course because you've no interest in it. There's a start point, and you grow from that as a trainer, I think. And the opportunities for learning are always there if you're open to them. Other things that I've been thinking about this episode are stuff that you've talked about, Matt. This idea of the challenge of submitting that work that evidences what you've learned. I think that's something we should be talking about today as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. So let's kind of start at the beginning of this then. So here are you now, Marianne. You're running to, as you say, there's lots of bits moving past this. You're competing against bigger companies, bigger budgets, bigger advertising. But bigger doesn't necessarily always mean the same. It doesn't necessarily mean with as much passion for the way it's done. And certainly I think it doesn't always mean that, like Andrew was just saying, the relationships that people form between trainers and trainees is the same. So I just want to go back to something you mentioned. You talk about your ADHD and then it came out. How did that, first of all, come about? What was the trigger? What was the flag? And following on from that, did it make you then reflect pretty quickly on you as a trainer, you as a teacher.
Yeah, well, I was 44 at the time, and my son, my eldest, we'd had, I want to say the word problem, but I don't like using that. It was a problem in the education system, that he struggled with maths, never dyscalculia was talked about, and yet still he went through his whole education, not dealt with. He's got anxiety, really didn't, saw a ed psych, then COVID happened, so pretty much went through all of it. And then I remember he didn't sleep, he wouldn't sleep on his own and stuff, and just accepted that. That's the way it was. Then I was reading an article one day, and I looked and I thought, that's me. All of those things are me. This was before it all kicked off as well, bearing in mind the whole women having ADHD. Of course they did. I mean, it hadn't exploded out there. So this was completely like, I hadn't seen anything about it. I worked with kids with ADHD as well. Naughty boys.
Yeah.
And so that's me. Don't sleep, this, all these things. So I was very lucky my husband's work, we had private help, and literally within 3 weeks I saw somebody, and then I had that diagnosis. And I was like, wow, this just, like, I wish I could go back and record that. Like for me, I just remember going, I'm not crap. Like literally, you're great, like you're not rubbish, because I'd realised unconsciously that I'd been carrying that around. Whether that was then working in education, that you always constantly being what you've done wrong, always what you've done wrong. And then when I was freelancing, it was, you've got to do it this way. And I'm like, that way doesn't work, and people like it. And then I suddenly realised the reason why when I do it that way, it's because people get me. It's me they get. And I teach, because when I was saying about my degree, I remember sitting there a lot of the time thinking, well, I walk in late or something, because I don't actually get what anyone's talking about. And then just reflecting on a friend I had that I went with, and she used to say, your work's, I'll look over your work and I'll tell you how it is. And my boyfriend at the time said, she's not your teacher. But it was this whole thing that I allowed people all the way through my life to tell me whether I was good, whether I was bad, whether I talked too much, whether I was too anything, whatever it was. Then all of a sudden I was like, I was never the problem here. Like literally I wasn't the problem. And in that moment, I then just got rid of all of the things that stopped me presenting in the world as the best version of me that I can be. Me, not that person, not something anybody else wants me to be, me. Because you can just go to another audience if you want to go and see another show. And I genuinely think that when I teach people how to teach, because I bring that passion to it, I always say people get like 2 for 1, because I do about Maslow and about all the psychology of it, that people learn about themselves. And they have quite a realisation when they learn with me that a lot of them go back to their own education and they go, I was rubbish, I was useless. And I go, no, you weren't. The system was to you. And these are people that are in their 40s and 50s that all of a sudden, and then this is when we talk about culture change, and I don't believe culture change comes from management necessarily or days. I genuinely think it comes from whoever trains people. If you bring that passion, whether it's because males not talking to each other, I could get males in a room to talk about all sorts of stuff because I wear my truth and they trust me. And I say, you need to go back to your sectors, particularly male-dominated ones, and you need to be that role model. And then gradually, that doesn't have no nights. I genuinely believe that, because so many people say to me, since I've got to know you, since I've worked with you, you've given me permission to just be me.
Okay. So I love the authenticity behind that, and that permission to kind of maybe not think of this as being a textbook version of anything, right? Yeah. Just figuring out what's right for you. And, I'll say this to you, Andrew, you educate, you teach. I can't imagine you being able to do it any other way than delivering education and training and information, as we do on this podcast, as you, not some version of you. So do you think then that that's part of the issue at the start of this, is that when we learn to learn, and therefore we start to think about learning to teach, we're trying to emulate what we think professional or good even looks like. Did you see that in your education experience, Andrew?
So I think there's a process of experiential learning. You start with those foundational skills, that you get the basics, and you deliver those. And as you get experience and you reflect on each session that you do, you grow in your understanding. After you've taught someone, you then think back and, well, that person in the corner really wasn't engaged. What could I have done differently to have brought them into the, that sort of thinking as an educator is always happening. And I still do that now, because that's how you improve and that's how you grow. It's the same in clinical practice. Every session that I have with someone, I think about, and I look back and think, how could I have done that differently to get more out of it? Because we're always trying to strive to be better. But at the centre of that are core principles. Marianne's just talked about Maslow, very fundamental psychological theory going back to the 1960s, but it's a really nice place to start from. And I think there are core basics that people need, because if you've got those core basics, you've got something to fall back on. You're not sort of busking, you're not doing it freestyle. There are some
I think that's the thing,
principles.
it's to do with getting to know what that person's needs are. And I think there's, as you said, some people are just naturally good. I know I teach people in the care sector to train. They got it. They're working as per person-centered anyway, which is the way that I teach. But I think when I teach, let's just say there's a guy that I know was a lorry driver, and he said, wow, you've just changed the way that I'm thinking about this. Because I would have thought that guy that was sat at the back being an absolute whatever in his mind, that was just not engaging, that was just being a pain. I'm now looking at that person in a completely different way. And I'm like, wow, my job here is done. Because that's exactly it. It's about understanding what people's needs are and not just assuming that I'm here to talk at you and you didn't take it in.
So let me ask you a question, and I'm going to try and preface this with a bit of sort of experience. Before my consultancy, before my business was doing well, post-COVID, I had to try and make ends meet and thought, why not take another job? He says, I ended up teaching speed awareness courses for one of the big 3 agencies in the UK. Now, when I saw that job advertised, there was nothing about it that I thought I couldn't do. Essentially, it was delivering information from Unscript online or in a classroom environment to audiences of between 10 and sort of 20 people, right?
And pretty scripted, isn't it, as well?
Well, yeah. Now, interestingly, I knew when I got the job, when I was offered it, I would have to get qualified. That was part of the criteria, was you need, I can't remember what they said, level 2 or level 3, right, teaching qualification. There's a little bit of autistic PDA, demand avoidance in me that kicked in. And I remember thinking, look at that, I don't need that. I've been teaching for years. I can do this anyway. And by the time I'd completed my training to do that, I'd already proven that and was getting feedback from both the sort of trial sessions I was doing and other trainers going, you are really good at this really fast. Most people take a lot longer. And I felt very conceited in going, it's not difficult though, is it? Let's be honest, this is not a difficult thing to do if you know how to teach people. So I think people that struggle maybe are not so good at teaching. Now I look back on that, I realise that's because I've been teaching in various guises, loosely teaching, unqualified, but sharing information since I was realistically 22. The first thing I delivered was training on a new product for British Airways as a member of cabin crew. And then it carried on. I taught customer service, I taught conflict resolution. I spent 15 years teaching people circus skills and juggling. I had to learn how to teach by learning how people learn. And to go to Andrew's point and your point, Marianne, I had to understand what it means to lose a room and how to get a room back, right? If you want to, my experience of this was, if you want to know how painful losing a room can be, try and be a children's entertainer doing a kids' party for 5 and 6 year olds and lose 36-year-olds who just don't give a rat's ass about your magic show, right? You will learn some very fast skills very quickly on how to get that audience back. Otherwise, you've got angry parents asking for their money back fast, and they did. But I never had a qualification. When I then got to a point where the agency I was working for said, yes, Matt, you're really good. Yes, Matt, you've now changed the script. Well done. A script that's been the same for 5 years. You've told us why it's not right, and we will let you implement these changes. Thank you. Because difference. They still said, but we still need to see that piece of paper. And I remember saying, why?
Well, of course.
Yeah? Why do you need that if I'm already this good at this? Why do you need that if I have probation, I'm being told I'm getting the best feedback from clients, the best feedback from co-trainers that you've had in years? Why do I need to prove that I can do it? You can see it. And they just said, because
Because you don't.
right? That's it. We just need it. So I came to you because I knew it's what you did. Now, I remember doing the day of the course I could attend and then doing a sort of delivering a session online, and nothing about it fazed me. Your way of teaching it, by the way, was amazing. There's something about sweets I'll come on to later on. You have an analogy with sweets, which is really useful, right? But I still remember sitting there thinking, there are people in this room who find this difficult. There are people in this room who are nervous about this. To me, it's just like getting out of bed in the morning. You want me to deliver information and make it engaging? Okay, just give me the script and I will change it and make it engaging. But it had to start with process. And what I got from that was remembering what the process was.
Yeah.
But I suppose the question is, I'm lucky, let's call it that I developed my own way of doing, and I learned and I made mistakes. And like Andrew said, I changed and I went, okay, what does that mean? I'm lucky that I had some natural ability. Not everybody has natural ability to stand in front of a room of virtual people or real people and deliver engaging, informative, educational content that meets the aims. Not everybody does that. And I think this is where this topic has got really interesting, because there are people who believe that late in life, oh, maybe they're going to change career, and I'm going to teach people now. I'm going to teach people what it means to have ADHD. And I'm not talking about coaching here. That's a completely different conversation for anyone listening. This is about going into organizations or schools or anywhere else and teaching people what it means to be neurodivergent. And the issue is, just because you've got a diagnosis does not mean you can teach. Just because you've read a lot online or read a lot of books and research does not mean everyone can teach. The question is, are we at a place where clients just have to take a punt and find out that what they've got is somebody that's not very engaging and can't deliver very good content, but has got a lot of lived experience and a good website? Or do we need to standardize? Are we at a point where we look at this thing called accreditation and go, okay, just like there are coaching qualifications that responsible coaches should do, although there's conjecture about those, should we be saying in order to provide training, there's a minimum? And if there is, what should that be?
I mean, I feel really passionate about it because I think, as you said, it was about processes. So I start off my sessions because I know that I get bored. If you're going to ask me to do something, I probably know a lot of it already. I'm going to switch off because I'm going to, but I'm going to shoot myself in the foot though, because there's probably a lot in there that I don't. So I start off straight away by saying to people, look, even if you've been training a long time, I promise you that you will walk away with more than you knew when you came. And whatever you know, please, share that with everybody. But I think it's about that process. And like you said, the biggest thing that people take away that were already training was that, and this is how I teach it, is that it's all very well knowing what to do because you've done it lots of times and it didn't go wrong. But when it goes wrong, if you don't have a system or a process to be able to fix it or sort it out, then you don't have one. And so really a lot of people say, I did used to unconsciously walk away and think, thank God that worked. And the other side of it is also looking and seeing where and if it went wrong. So sometimes people blame themselves as a trainer, and other times people will blame the client, let's just say. Whereas if you're able to actually know where it went wrong, I know that the other day I had some feedback about something and I thank the person for feedback, but I'm still happily doing it my way because the objectives I have and the way that I teach is that way. The objectives were met. Not a problem. It just wasn't the way that they, and probably because they're not neurodiverse as well, saw teaching coming that way. But I think that by having a qualification, it does mean standardization. Is that qualification fit for purpose? I would debate whether it is. However, that's why, that's another thing to be changing, which, I've written a program for something. But something is better than nothing. But having nothing, which some people have said there shouldn't be anything, and I said, no, let's change the something. Because something is the problem, let's change it. Don't take away. Because the things, if you didn't have CQC or Ofsted, you've got cowboys potentially out there doing. In the care sector, you don't need a training qualification to deliver training, and there are no standards. So it's pretty much like the Wild West out there.
So what's the standard then? It was AET, wasn't it? I did with you.
The so-called standard, minimum standard, is the award in education and training, that's off-qual. So if I very briefly, this will dispel some of the myths out there or confusions. So if you've got, so I recently wrote a program, and I'm sure you've written courses, a PowerPoint that is, I'm going to say PowerPoint slide deck or whatever.
Yeah.
You could call it a course. That's what people call it. I'm going to deliver some training and it's a course. Right? That's just, it's not worth the paper it's written on. It is just what it is. The next level up you've got is CPD accredited, which is basically an organisation that you can go to and you pay them money to look at your course. And from what I understand, I don't think they look at the content of it. They'll look to see and say whether they feel that it's been put together correctly, are there aims, are there objectives. I think they're improving, and then they will give you the stamp to say yes. Next level up you've got qualifications, so they would be of qualifications. So that's what that would be. So it's RQF, which is the regulated qualification framework. So that's where if you're doing A levels, like my son's doing a BTEC, and he said, is it the same as somebody doing A level? I said, it's a different way of delivery, but an assessment, but it's the same equivalent level, which is RQF.
Mm-hmm.
So you level 3. So like you said, the AET is a level 3 RQF qualification. So off-qual, that's the highest level. Whether that's right or not is under debate. But literally what they do is they look through to make sure that that qualification is fit for purpose. Is it doing what the industry needs it to do? Is it all of those things they look through? I wrote a program recently because I feel like the level 4 and 5 for teaching for trainers, not teachers or lecturers, isn't actually fit for purpose. I know that I would never recommend most to do it because I know it's not going to do what they need. So I thought, well, there isn't anything, so I'll write something. So I wrote something that would be needed. So I got it awarding body. So like you've got City and Guild and Highfield. I then paid them to go through my course with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that it does everything it says that it should, is the content right. So now I can say that that's a program. I'm not allowed to call it a qualification because it's not RQF and it's accredited to them. I now would like to get it off-qual accredited, which would then mean that if somebody, so the beauty industry, everything's just blown up for the same reason, because somebody's just being killed.
Yeah.
Somebody's been delivering courses, programs, whatever, because there's all that confusion. That's where the issue we were just saying earlier, that I think some of it is that people like to, so there's lots of train the trainers out there. They're not worth the paper they're written on. And a lot of that is companies making money out of the handy ones or whatever it might be. But actually, I say to people, well, you could just do a qualification in how to train, because you have to be competent or qualified to deliver whatever it is you were going to deliver anyway. It saves money, but it also, all of the stuff that should be in there is actually in there. But I think some of the problem is that I think some companies probably do knowingly perceive, but I think some probably don't know. Issue I have is that the client shouldn't have to know what they don't know. I'm very transparent about what I say. I can offer you the AET. I went to a company the other week and I said, you don't have to do the qualification. I just won't charge you for accreditation. I'll still teach you exactly the same. In the end, because I taught it the same, they've opted to do the qualification because their trainers. They want their trainers to have the qualification so that when they go out and sell their training to clients, they're able to say, our trainers are actually qualified trainers. So it does actually add value to whatever you're selling as well. And I think in a market where people are wanting to stand out, if you can have that, of course, better, really.
So I think this is an opportune moment then, because you've just used a lot of words, terms that most people will have heard in the UK before, maybe not really understood. and not really understood the differences, right? So what I'm talking about there is the difference between a program and, of course, the difference between a qualification and an accreditation or a certification. Because I know that there is nothing to stop me next month setting up Think Neurodivergent Education Training School and charging people several £1,000s to learn how to teach my way, right? And then writing them a piece of paper with a fancy certificate that says you are now certified through the Think Neurodiversity Training School. And they could quite happily go, yes, I've got a certified qualification. I've been trained by this. It means, as far as I'm aware, nothing.
Only by your, I think it's a bit like with therapy, because I think therapy is the same. I think so long as you do what you say you're going to do, I think counselling's a different thing. With therapy, it would be more to do with the client being happy with what they got.
Mm.
But my concern is people thinking they're getting something that they're...
Yeah. So what makes something to be off-qual? What would mean if I wrote my program, like you've written yours, what makes it not a program, a qualification? That is therefore getting off-qual to look at it, to dissect it, and to rubber stamp it. Is that right?
Folks, it's Matt, sorry to butt in, but please, would you do us a favour? We're a year old now, and we're really grateful for everyone that's been with us in this year, learning from us and sharing the information that Andrew and I have put out. But we need your help. So could you please like, share and subscribe to the podcast and to the channel? We have big plans for 2025, and we need as many people to be able to see what we're doing. So if you can do those things for us and leave comments wherever you watch or listen, it really, really does help. For now, let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah, so I went through that doing mine. I wanted to get it higher than CPD accredited because I also wanted it to kind of show where it nestled. So I was saying you had to have the AET first to be able to go on to do that, just really because I needed a minimum level. So what I'll do now is, once I've got the money, and I'm looking into it with Off-Qual, so they literally then will go through it with fine-tooth comb. They have to make sure that, and the biggest thing for me is it's to do with assessment, is that a lot of trainers are very good at all of the other aspects, but the training bit, the assessment bit is where it falls down, and that's where Off-Qual. So they stipulate on there when you look on the website, anything that wants to go through as a qualification has to be an assessment in there. It's not just to say that somebody's attended the course the program that I wrote, and that's what we called it. I had to show that there was objectives, there was aim, there was objectives, and how they were met. But I didn't pay for the route for any of that work to be assessed. So for that one, it would just be that I would say, yes, they've attended.
Yes.
Because then that would be another level. So with Off-Qual, what then would happen is you then could take it to an awarding body and say, will you? So like the AET, there's like Highfield Operate, City and Guilds, loads of different awarding bodies. You could go to them and then, assuming, sell that qualification to them that can be delivered through there. So then what would happen is it would then mean that other people could then offer that, and then you go down the whole quality assurance. So I've got my own centre, so I offer the AET through Highfield. That means then that so when I first set up, every person that I delivered to, their work had to be quality assured. So I had to pay somebody to go through my marking, all of my work, my delivery, my CPD. The next year, then at the end of that year, the Highfield, their external quality assurer, they randomly pick, and then they go through those and they say, yeah, we're happy with you, you're less of a risk. The following year, we then went to half of the cohort, then we went to 3/4, and now half. So I only have to pay for half of mine. That then gives the assurance to those people as far as you can that what I say I'm going to do is what I've said, and also that qualification is valid.
Okay. So I've got a question for you, Andrew. Let's use this thing. I set up this course, right? And based on the conversations you and I have had, and based on the information I've learned by doing this podcast about, let's say, medication, I start and I write in my course content about medication, about what it means to be titrated, what the medicines do, right? And I deliver that, and then somebody, in trying to apply it, causes somebody harm. They give somebody poor information, for argument's sake. Yes, so they interpret something wrong. If that course is no more accredited than because I said it's good, that program, is no more accredited than because I said it's good, and that causes harm, there, in my eyes, the only comeback then is on me, assuming I have public liability and indemnity insurance, and it would come straight back to me as well, you said that was fact. Is that right, as it stands? How would that sit with you as a clinician if you knew people were doing that in the first place? Non-clinical professionals delivering clinical information based on what they've read, heard, etc.
Well, we know that happens. That's the reality. And not only do non-clinical people deliver clinical information, they also mix that in with non-clinical information and compare clinical data with... I don't know whether you watched the Russell Barkley podcast that he does, but he did a brilliant one on phototherapy, which I'd never heard of, but it was just brilliant. And it's about how you market this. Teaching is often marketing. It's marketing ideas, isn't it? And you can put these flashy labels on and make it sound really convincing and appealing to people. I want a Big Mac. Well, why? It's a pile of mush that's not very nutritious, but people like it. So it's the original question you asked was about who's accountable for that going wrong. Well, ultimately the person who took that advice, because that advice wasn't substantiated by any quality assurance. There wasn't any evaluation of that advice, was there? So as you guys were just talking, it was very clear that there's two elements to training, at least, if not more. But there's the content, and then there's how you deliver it. And that's what the person buys. But then how you assure that is good is by evaluating that and standardizing that evaluation, so that anybody who goes through that process can then say, well, I've met that standard, and that standard has been evaluated against lots of people doing that. When people come to me and say, will you prescribe a medicine, they hopefully know that I've been through a standard process about prescribing, and a lot of that training about prescribing had nothing to do with the pharmacology of medicines. There was very little in terms of the pharmacology of medicines taught at university. It was about the frameworks, the law around these things, the who's accountable, who's responsible. And I think often these training courses are delivering lots of content, but then the bits around the edge that are the really important bits, I've got a whole process agreed with the CQC if someone dies in front of me on screen in Divergence. Hopefully that'll never happen, but I know exactly what to do if that happens.
I think trainers aren't. I think that from conversations I've had with people, and I got called a qualifications snob a while ago, which is fine because I'm aware that badge now, completely. I'm going to, because it isn't just about having the qualification; it's the experience too. Because to be clear, it's not just about qualification; it's about actually foundation being there and the icing on the cake. That my point being to this person was that, okay, your stuff, and that's fine, but actually being a trainer has a lot more, as you've just said, Andrew, a lot more responsibility there, and actually now more so than ever, even if you're not teaching something dangerous or where there's potential for that, whether it's mentally dangerous or whatever it is that actually a lot of the reason why I wrote the program I did was because there's a lot of trainers from years ago that aren't understanding the equality and diversity stuff. I'm like, you can't just say the things that you did once. Literally, you can't, because you might get into trouble. And so it's about educating them about that. But you do have to keep the people feel safe, whether that's physically or emotionally, but also about saying the right things or dealing with things correctly. So you may think you can do that well, or you might just... I had somebody once that attracted me, dermal fellows, I think she did, and she said, but I'm not interested in this. Well, I said, well, I'm afraid you need to be. You literally need to be, because because you do. And I think that is the thing, the standardization bit. It's about knowing that somebody has gone through that process to know. And that's why I know that some people don't opt to offer what I do, because it's just a bit much hard work. Believe me, as somebody who's got ADHD, I've got two sides of it. I love the fact that it's standardized, because it stops me skiving out of stuff, because I admit, when it comes to admin, I can't stand it. However, when those processes are in, I know that I'm really confident then that I've done what I should have done, because I had to do it, and I understand why I had to do it. And those people that don't do it, I think a lot of the time it can be because it seems a bit too much of a pain in the neck, really. But it's about, I said to you, I work really hard at trying to find ways for people to be able to do the assignments, because I know exactly what it's like. So I break things down, I reflect it. I'm now doing it so people can do it online, and I give people things. A lot of the companies won't. And that's why I pride myself on being somebody that will be neurodiverse friendly, if you want to call it. It's really inclusive.
Well, yeah.
Really say that. But then,
Okay. So I think then what's important here is the confusion that's out there, whether it's from people who want to deliver content or clients who want to pay someone to deliver content. I think the confusion that very often is out there is in the distinction between something that's just written, that's my opinion and sounds good, right? And it's about being very clear of, you may learn something, I hope you will learn something, but the net result is no more than you've gained some new information, hopefully, how you apply it. But it doesn't give any accreditation, any qualification. There's no more stages to it, right? Yeah. So you're just delivering stuff. You spoke about CPD. Now it's interesting. As long as I've been in work and as long as I've been aware of it, before I met you, Marianne, if somebody said, what's the gold standard qualification for anything in terms of training in industry, I'd have said CPD.
That's what workplaces often will look for, because they know what they're talking about.
So the question is that then, why are we, and this isn't to not CPD, I understand what they do, but why is that we have a CPD organisation, and again, they are an awarding body, they're a vetting thing, they're doing a thing, but it's not the same as AAT, it's not the same as off-qual, right? Or after, it's different, and yet there are lots of people that would think if it's CPD, it's good, it's done, it's enough.
Most people that would be seen, the thing that would almost be seen over something else, which is frustrating, really, because it isn't. And actually, somebody isn't necessarily. I look at what I charge for my AAT course, and I look at what people, bearing in mind that's got registration, book, all those things. Then I look at what people that deliver train the trainers charge, and I think, well, actually, all things being told, they're charging more than me for something that isn't worth the paper it's written. Whereas that qualification they get will be something they can go to somewhere else. So if they were going to deliver NEBOSH, like health and safety, they could. So some sectors do actually say you have to have that qualification. So if you were delivering NEBOSH, or like you said, the speed awareness, they say, well, that's that gold standard that you've got to have for you to be able to do that. Which, in my book, is really, really good. To have that. Whether that qualification is right is another thing. Because I'm still fighting things within, hence coming up with something else. Yeah, it's just I think you just have to see it, as you said, Andrew, as that standardization, that it's the best that you're going to get. We've talked about it before. I know that I would rather go and see a doctor that's qualified than a doctor that's somebody that calls themselves a doctor that knows a lot. It's nice. Ideally, I'd have a doctor that's qualified and that's got a really good bedside manner and everything else. So I know that qualifications aren't everything, and that's what I've been called out on. Oh, so-and-so is really good. I'm not disputing that. I'm absolutely not disputing that. I just know that I would rather my kids were taught by somebody who was qualified and really good.
So let me ask you this question first, Andrew, then I'll come to you, Marianne, and it's, we discussed this briefly online. On that point, we've all got kids when they're of age. If we want them to learn to drive, we're going to look at driving instructors. Yes? And those driving instructors, we know, or at least we're going to check, have completed a basic level of training to be called a driving instructor. And then when they take their test, they go to somebody else who's got an even higher level of training to be a test assessor, right? What we're not doing is going down to the pub and saying, Dave, you're a good driver. Can you make sure my son, can you give him a license? Because our kids will not get a license unless the person that's doing that assessment and that training has got their piece of paper. And we accept that and we say, yes, that's how it should be. It's the same for, you know, I've recently started playing golf again. If I want to go and improve my golf, yes, I could talk to one of the guys who's got a really low handicap at the club and they may be able to give me some tips. But if I want to improve and I want to know that the person teaching me has got the ability, I'm going to go to the pro. Because I know that the pro has done a qualification in coaching and teaching golf through the Professional Golf Association. That is a minimum standard. And I also know that if I feel they haven't delivered a product, there is recourse. I can go to them or the PGA and say, actually, that PGA professional didn't deliver on my expectations, right, for that money. Yet in this space of neurodivergent education and others, but, you know, this is what we're talking about, ADHD education, let's say, there is a real argument against, but lived experience is all we need. People say, oh, but I don't need a qualification. I know this. I am this. Therefore, I can teach this. And that's enough. My question to you, Andrew, is, based on the examples of we would never question a driving instructor not being qualified, what do you think drives that viewpoint of you don't need a qualification to teach people what it means to be neurodivergent?
It's about what people want to hear, isn't it? You don't need a qualification to teach some people certain aspects of what it means to be neurodivergent. There are aspects of neurodivergence that I am not qualified to talk about. So you have to find your trainer matched to where you are. I'm always aware on the podcast of how much information I give. There's a lot of things I don't say on the podcast because it wouldn't be the right place to say it. Yeah, and that is about learning how to communicate information and where to communicate it. I think the more experienced you are as an educator, the more you understand where you can and can't say things and where it's appropriate to say things and where it's not appropriate to say things. And if you're not well qualified, then there is a risk that you say things that are harmful because they're misinterpreted with other people's partial understandings of things. So it's a tricky one because there are elements of life with neurodivergence that having lived experience can help with. Just being able to say, yeah, I do that too. I leave my washing in the washing machine, to use the cliche. But what does that do? How does that help someone in dealing with the challenge that they face at that moment? Because they're not worried about whether their washing's in the washing machine or not. There's bigger things, there's bigger deals going on. And yet some of this sort of flashy marketed stuff that's glossy headlines that you know appeal to more people because they're more comfortable to hear. You know, I've left my washing in the washing machine. You know, and yeah, that is a pain when you do that. I do that. Everyone in our house does that. But what does that say about what's been going on in the brain of the person who put that washing on? And you know, there's so much complexity. So I think we have to be mindful of glossy marketing and what substance there is. I think we talked about this the other week, didn't we? It was that sort of flashy stuff in the shop front and rats out the back that we talked about on the podcast a few weeks back. It's the same again.
The problem has come that there's so many people making money out of this. I think that's where a lot of the, you know, I'll write a course about, I'll run a course on that. And as you said, it's more than, it's like, yes, but what is a course? Like we talked about, what is a course? But I would say that aims and objectives bit is that, so people say to me sometimes, can you do some training on whatever? And I'll say, what's your objective? What do you want them to get? And they look at me and I said, until you tell me, I'm afraid I can't, because that's me. I will then deliver and assess to tell you that they can do this and they know that. But until you say that, a lot of people won't know to say that. And I think one of the interesting things for me is when people ask me what I do, I'll say I'm a teacher trainer, and they go, "What?" And I say I'm a teacher trainer. I teach people how to teach and educate, and they go, "What?" And I think there we have it, because actually a lot of people end up being managers, and a lot of people end up being trainers because they've been somewhere a long time, or they know stuff. And unfortunately, both sets, unless they're qualified or even at very minimum trained, they're going to fail at some point the people that they're managing or the people they're teaching and themselves, because a lot of people say, I didn't know how to do it because I wasn't equipped. I did my best. And I always say to people that come on the course, when they finish, they go, "Oh my gosh, I've been doing this wrong." And I said, "No, you haven't. You've been doing it to the best of your ability until now, and that probably was excellent. Now you've got the tools to be absolutely amazing."
So I want to summarize this, because I can see that people would listen to this and it can, like the conversation, it can go two ways, right? It can seem like this is almost exclusionary, right? It could seem to some people that, oh, well, you're just trying to make it so I can't do this because I'm not qualified, and that's not fair. You're being exclusionary. I can't afford a qualification. I can't, I haven't got the facility to do that. Or it could be seen as, actually, there's some logic to this. Some kind of standardization, some kind of minimum level of demonstratable ability is how I view it, to create material, deliver educational content, and meet aims and objectives and outcomes would seem to me logical. It's why every session, I should say, that I start to deliver, the first thing I say is, by the end of this session, you should be able to. The aim is that you'll be able to. I will check with them along the way, right? I check at the end, because I want to know that if I got that, it's met that. And if it's not, I offer them extra, right? That's fine. Not everyone does that. There is a lot of stand-up, there's slides, off a go. And what have you got from it? So whilst it can go either way, people could see it either way, the reason I wanted to talk to you, Marianne, the reason I wanted to do this with Andrew is to say that this is such an important topic. Understanding how to support our neurodivergent colleagues, friends, family members, but particularly when we talk about in workplaces, being able to do that is really important. And if we're going to put people in positions of real importance as educators, I think it's logical to expect that there is some kind of minimal expectation on their understanding of how and their ability to deliver that education. I don't think personally that there's anything wrong with that. I will give you two a 60-second opportunity, maybe a summary, to say, what do you think on that? Are we being inclusive or exclusionary by having this conversation? So I'll go to Andrew first.
I think there's a value in being exclusionary, and whilst you were giving that lead up into what I was going to say, I was formulating what I was going to say. It has nothing to do with your lead up. And what I was going to say was, it can often be helpful to, rather than think about asking people what they can do, it can be quite revealing if you ask someone what they can't do. What are the limits of what you are trying to do? Because if you ask someone what the limits of what they're trying to do, and they go, I don't know, then they're not competent to do what they're trying to do. It's always important to know where the limits of your practice, be that education or clinical, how far you can take it before you say, I am now out of my depth. That's a really important thing, and possibly something that could be useful to people that are listening, is to just flip that question on its head. Don't always ask, what are you going to do? What are you not going to do? What are you unable to deliver as whatever you're trying to sell me? Because that can cast a different shadow, that question, I think.
Yeah, I'll take that. Okay, Marianne, how about you?
I think having that qualification, to me, it's commitment as well, that somebody is committing to say that I am going to learn all of those aspects, and I'm going to be willing to learn from that as well. But it's about having that framework. As I say, people say, you're going to teach me how to teach that or that. I said, no, I'm going to teach you the tools for you to be able to go and interpret it as the best way that you need to. So it's not like you don't have to do it this way. But I do think genuinely, and I think you would agree, Andrew, and I think you would, Matt, as well, that it does, by doing that, it does give you some commitment, and also realising that you've got a responsibility. When you're training people, you've got a responsibility, and about what you should be saying and what you shouldn't be saying. And that is where the difference I see. When people finish my training, they go, I do something on roles and responsibilities, and they say, I never even thought about half of that stuff. I didn't even think. And that then gets passed on, because if you're teaching people, you're teaching them then to respect that and to realise the responsibility they have. So I can be seen as exclusionary, but I think it's the way that it's taught. And if you choose somebody that teaches you, that you understand, which probably won't mean, I'm not saying necessarily me, it won't necessarily mean one of the bigger companies, and certainly not doing it by Eden. It would mean choosing people, the person, and then asking lots of questions around how it's delivered, what support. I always support people afterwards.
Yeah.
Then it isn't exclusionary, because that is fully inclusive.
Cool. So let's tell people, first of all now, Marianne, where can they find you? What's the best way for people to get hold of you if they want to talk about developing their own training abilities and teaching abilities, or for their organisations? How do we find you?
I'm 2mtraining.co.uk, that's my website. And on LinkedIn, 2M Training. It will be and consultancy soon, because I can support people with writing their training as well. That's something that people might struggle with. And I'm on Facebook as well, and I do a podcast on Friday as well.
You do indeed. I know. Awesome. Right, we will put all that in the notes as well as ever, folks. And I will just say this. I hope that what you've got from this conversation is an understanding that sometimes we can hear lots of words and interpret them into what we think they mean. But just listening to Marianne and Andrew on this conversation, it's important to understand what words mean. What does qualified mean? What does accredited mean? And where and when is it important? And it's that ability to know the context, to know what your aims and objectives are when you're approaching someone, right? Why are you asking for someone to talk to you or deliver training? And what do you think that means? In that, hopefully we'll start to get people who are delivering what they say, the way they say it, the way clients need it, so that no one is left feeling like that's not met their expectations. Because that's all I think for me I want is the quality of information and education to match everyone's expectations. So please go check out 2M. Please go book a course with Marianne. I can vouch for it. It was fantastic. I went in thinking I knew everything, and like you said, came out of it going, actually, I'd never thought of that.
Feel more empowered. Empowered is the word. I think when you've got a qualification, you can feel empowered.
Yeah, you can. And I just felt more, look, this is a word I use a lot. I felt more credible.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. Was I good at it before? Maybe. Did I have any credibility? No, so I've got to get on that. And,
you're very, very good.
well, you know, performer in me. But listen, Marianne, thank you. Andrew, thank you. And to everyone else, if you've got questions, feel free. You can comment on the videos. You can send us emails, talkadhdpodcast@gmail.com. You can ask any questions. We'll try and reply or forward them on to Marianne if necessary. But other than that, we will see you next week for another episode of Talk ADHD. And I've lost my mouse.